So hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of the SaaS Sessions podcast. Today we have Ashwin Krishna on the show with us. Ashwin is a B2B marketing and growth leader with strong commercial acumen and a 15-year track record, inspiring teams to deliver hyper growth in SaaS companies across the Middle East, APAC, and the USA. Currently, he is the head of growth and marketing at Tact.ai. AI is putting sellers first with human-friendly CRM solutions that are frictionless, connected, and prescriptive. Tact.ai is also backed by Axel, Redpoint, Honeywell, Salesforce, Amazon Ventures, and more. So, hey Ashwin, such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Absolutely, Sunil. I think, first of all, I think thanks for the opportunity. I've been listening to some of the podcasts. It's great to see you've been sharing, how the traction has been. I think that is one data point to sort of clearly that indicates that the SaaS market is exploding. And, the
Right.
public data point truly says that the valuations for SaaS companies are all-time, right? So while some of the industries like airlines are really having headwinds, but SaaS in the other end of the spectrum, it truly has tailwinds, and it's not just the valuations, it's also about the amount of adoption for software, right? I think adoption for digital has truly accelerated by possibly a couple of years, actually. And it's
Totally.
never been an exciting time to be in the world of SaaS.
Exactly. And I think 2020 was a great year for SaaS as a whole, and plus the podcast, SaaS Sessions podcast as well. We hit a great milestone of having 10,000 listeners listening to the show. So I think that also shows, or that also validates that like more and more people want to learn about SaaS. They want to know more like how other SaaS companies are, driving traction, doing GTM, and building their product teams, building the customer success teams, and like they want to learn from more. And there are more and more people who are coming up, more and more SaaS leaders who are coming and speaking out as well, sharing all the knowledge that they've got. It's kind of helps the entire ecosystem grow as well, right? Yeah, especially in India. So, thanks a lot. And that comes to a point like you as being a leader in SaaS, like you also, thanks a lot for coming on the show and taking your time to do this and share your knowledge about expanding and selling SaaS products in the global markets, right? So today I want to specifically discuss with you, like, how do you choose like one market to sell your SaaS company? Market is still a big thing. Like, you can do APAC, Middle East, EMEA, and US, and all of these are very different. And even if you consider, let's say, one big market, which is EMEA, you can go double click on that and you can go deep dive into running GTM for each specific countries, right? Because EMEA is a bigger market, and each of the individual country in EMEA would, respond differently to SaaS, and how they deal with what is the persona in Germany would be different than the persona in, let's say, UK or something like that. So really excited to discuss this with you. So since I was talking about persona, right? Let's maybe deep dive into that. How do you select the right person, before going into any market, right? Well, because I've seen that a few roles that are there in the US, those the same roles, they would be called something different. Their responsibilities would be something different if you come to EMEA. If you go down under in Australia and New Zealand, the roles would be very different, right? And the responsibilities would be shared and something like that. So how do you select, a right persona for the company, and then, going into that particular market?
Sure, sir. I think first of congratulations on hitting a great milestone with your podcast. I wish you the best actually for the future as well.
Thank you.
Sure. So, as you rightly said, finding the right people, right? Finding the ICP, the ideal customer profile. And once you know what type of company you want to go after, the second critical step is to figure out the right people, right? Right people are the right buying committee to go after actually. At the end of the day, no matter whether you're an enterprise or an SMB SaaS company, your buyers are going to be humans actually.
Right.
So, it's funnily called as B2B marketing, but I call it as B2H. And off late, people are accepting this fact that you don't have to tell boring stories, right? Because it's B2B. So primarily, prima facie, right, the lens which we can use to pick the right personas are take a step back and figure out what are the key jobs which your product would solve, right? What are the key jobs your product would essentially solve? Our key objectives, in other words, right? Our jobs, if I want to, if you allow me to talk a little bit more about jobs, this whole idea of the whole framework of jobs to be done by Professor Clayton is possibly, arguably, one of the easiest and the most effective framework we can use to build the entire brand, actually. right? And again, coming back to persona, it's all about what are the key jobs your product would essentially touch base truly solve. For example, so we were selling e-commerce or an omni-channel commerce platform for large retailers across Asia actually. So that was
Mm-hmm.
product. So when you look at the persona, right? So primarily, again, if you take a step back and see what are the jobs our platform or a product was trying to solve, so
Mm-hmm.
it was essentially helping brands to go online. It was helping them to acquire, engage, transact, and retain their customers in an omni-channel world, both online as well as in store.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the top two jobs, right? So all we have to do is then what all we did is map these jobs with the personas. Who will be the people who will be responsible? Who will be the people who will have these jobs as the KPIs, right?
Right.
So one way to so one thing which would differ in terms of geographies, right? Let's say in the US, or let's say compared to India, again I will go back to let's say 3 or 4 years back, but I'll sort of try and share a learning or a bit of a framework which will be helpful for let's say other industries too. Is the number one thing is looking at the market maturity, right? Looking at the market maturity, the personas would differ a bit. Let's say we were in this omni-channel commerce space. US was quite mature, and India was possibly 3 years lagging behind, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what it means is in the US there were specific people who were hired for omni-channel commerce.
Right.
While in India, there were other folks, let's say the digital marketing folks, or let's say brand leaders, mostly digital marketing folks, were also given the task of running an e-commerce store actually, right? So
Right.
own.com/marketplaces. That's
Mm-hmm.
because market was not mature, and then people were not ready to sort of hire. And while they had a vision, some companies had this whole fancy thing saying, I want to go omni-channel, but they didn't have the commitment and a long-term vision to say, hey, it's not just about talking about it, but it's also about hiring the right people, investing in long-term, let's say platform, and then stay patient and then ensuring you keep the customer in the center, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one key which would differentiate whom we are going to talk to is the market maturity actually. So the more mature the market is for your product, that
Mm-hmm.
market will have more folks in the buying committee, especially there will be specialists or experts. Again, going back to the same product, right? So we were not able to, let's say, we essentially tried flirting with US. We wanted to see if we have a product market fit. We figured out we didn't have because when we spoke to some of these e-commerce sites or the omni-channel commerce sites, their viewpoint, their world of view about what a omni-channel commerce really mean is very different than this digital marketing, let's say brand leaders who were also trying to set up a e-com store was completely different actually.
Mm-hmm.
Hence, the more the depth, the personas will also be, very, very specialized, right? Very specialized in nature. So that's one learning. So based on the market maturity, your personas would change. If the market is not very mature, you possibly also have to go and find out some proxies, right? Some proxy profiles who will be possibly managing, who will be possibly your buyers actually.
Makes sense.
But when you look at the enterprise space, yeah, there are multiple buyers. So you will end up talking to most of the folks, right? While there will be a functional leader who will be, one basic framework is this, right? So there will be a business user or a functional user/buyer. Let me call it as functional buyer. So that's one, right? So those are the ones who will have the budget, and your typical internal IT or a CIO org would be very strong influencer because they'll be the one who will evaluate the platform for scalability, security, reliability, etc. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, there would be the managers or the CXO -1, CXO -2, who would typically end up selecting, shortlisting a set of vendors actually. So we have to
Mm-hmm.
ensure all three, four of this personas
Mm-hmm.
have to be well balanced. You can't cross the line of an influencer or a manager who is shortlisting the vendor and then directly jump on board and directly talk to CXO because I have the budget, but I'm not going to manage the day-to-day operations. Please have a chat with my e-commerce manager, right? Who would possibly be your point of contact. So this is not related to geography, but I just want to talk about how do you
Yeah.
manage different personas. It's not just about buyer. You also have to balance influencer users, bring all of them on the same page at the right time so that your the decision making cycle accelerates.
I think you bring a very great point, right? Like, let's say even when you're selling a CRM as a product, right? Like the buyer is the VP sales or someone in the CXO level, but the actual user is gonna be like a sales manager or a territory sales manager or an enterprise sales rep, right? So how do you differentiate between, like, on basis of a role, you can definitely differentiate between a buyer versus a user, right? But then how do you market to both of them, right? As you rightly mentioned, you need to show the buyer the ROI, the economic impact, how much time it's going to save them, and all the benefits that they're going to get, right? But for the user, it's going to be more on the usability aspect, right? Like how easier it is for them to get things done, and how easier it is for them to log, because CRM as a product, like the users hate putting all the data into the CRM, right? Like they don't want to put in like many entries and stuff like that, is what I've heard. But like, talking about marketing specifically, right? Like how would you market, or how would you do marketing on different channels to a buyer versus how would you do a marketing on like different channels to the user, right? Because as you mentioned, right, you also want to please the influencer, you also want to please the user who's going to be eventually using the product that you're trying to sell in with respect to the CRM.
Right. Yeah, that's a great. The whole idea of keeping the influencer and the buyer, not just, yeah, so buyer, influencer, and the user. Right? So three
Mm-hmm.
folks. Keeping all the three folks on the same page is very important. I think the way to do it is the same GTM framework, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the job or the objectives of, let's say, a head of sales ops while buying a CRM versus the jobs of a VP sales who is potentially an influencer, and the jobs for a sales manager and a sales rep is slightly different actually. So sales ops function is to ensure one, they get right amount of data so that they can project the revenue. So for projecting the revenues, they need data. For data to happen, they need CRM adoption actually. So those are the jobs, right? So those are the jobs for sales ops. For sales head or a VP sales, it's very simple, right? They just want their team to hit the quota quarter and quarter. Very, very simple. And how you do it, how the product or platform helps them to do it, that's totally up to us. I know how we communicate, but the fundamental aspect we should understand is the jobs actually. And for a user, as you rightly said, it's all about how easy it is to use. Is it mobile first,
Mm-hmm.
or how many clicks it will take? It's more tactical, but when we market, I think number one is to tease out this messaging for different personas very specifically, and
Mm-hmm.
then typically your influencers are the one who will sometimes go and go to a website and sign up so that uh, so they were the one who will have time, right? So influencers, what I mean is, for us, let's say even within sales ops org, while the whole org has a budget, influencer for us would be the sales ops manager actually, right? So
Mm-hmm.
who will be potentially doing the shortlisting. So for them, we will be very, very, very specific about how will sales ops can become successful in CRM adoption, things like that. So the moment we get the foot in the door, right? So that's when the salesperson has the acts as an ambassador to do marketing within the org actually, right? Within the org, figuring out at the right time who are the other folks in the committee, ask them whether they can all be asked to join a call. So I think marketer's job is to really, potentially, be there in the digital channels, or let's say on the email, talking to different folks about jobs. But typically the influencers are the one who will do the vendor evaluation. So marketers spend the most time to sort of do an outreach and sort of get a meeting with them. Of course, and sometimes decision makers also agree. But the point which a lot of the companies don't do is they end their marketing after they get the meeting actually,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think we have to extend the conversation with the sales team to understand who are the other folks who are going to be the potential people, and try and
Mm-hmm.
find a way. May not be directly through email, but can we put them on a brand campaign on LinkedIn, and very indirectly sort of try and push a few ads which talks about, let's say, the mostly the trust building ads, right? The kind of customers we work with, the kind of scalability that we have, so things like that. So when they actually sit beside in for a conversation, somewhere in their mind they should believe that, okay, I know this company, right? These folks seems to be reliable folks. Because they have seen some ads, they have built some perception. So that's the whole key actually. So in enterprise setup especially, the marketing would not end when you get in touch with one of the personas, but the marketing will extend till the whole deal process, right? But we have to be very careful because we can't go overboard. We can't cross the line because there are the political or the power center struggles will also be there, right? We have to keep that in mind. But that's where you've got to work with the sales reps, motivate them to get all the contacts, for that specific account, see, what can we communicate to respective people. Or one simple thing is, put all of them in a campaign, let's say on LinkedIn, try and find a way to run some display campaigns for them actually.
Makes sense. Very, very interesting. So now once we have, let's say, known the buyer, right, and who's the buyer, who's the influencer, who's the user, we have kind of marketed them. Once we have this strategy there, so how do you actually, get to know the market as well, right? Like, because let's say you're expanding to EMEA and you're expanding to APAC. So how do you get to know, okay, what kind of buyers are there in EMEA, what kind of influencers are there in EMEA, what kind of users are there in EMEA? Because there would be some differences in let's say all different markets, and each of these three users would have the same objective in the end, but then there would be some role differences, there would be some process changes, and how they buy the product and how they procure a tool inside the company. All these things matter, right? And how you deliver your marketing to them also is where would change market to market. So how do you, in this scenario, like once we know who's the buyer, who's the influencer, who's the user, how do you get to know a particular market? Let's say, for example, APAC, right? Like how do you get to know like the APAC market?
Sure. So again, to be very specific about understanding the buying committees in different countries, I think the best way to do it is go out there and do the primary research, right? So one, if you let's say have a brand in, let's say, US, and they also have and they're a happy customer, and they also have a presence in Southeast Asia, and you want to get into Southeast Asia, so talk to the brand folks, talk to, let's say, some of your folks who already bought the product from the US. Ask them, hey, can you get me references there? We don't want to sell, we just want to understand them all. So go through some of your existing customers who have a big presence, and then go and request them to make connects, so that if you are going through a reference, then it's a lot easier, people would give more information. So that's number one. So second is so talk to some of the partners, right? Talk to some of your potential partners who might be the right win-win partner for your for you in the specific region. So those are the ones who potentially have sold stuff, right? Because, for example, in the Middle East, especially in countries like Saudi, right, you will not be able to enter the market unless you have the local partner actually, because these are just folks who are in the region for a very long time. Some of them sell pretty much everything, all the way from hardware to software maintenance to whatnot actually. So I think number two reference is talk to some of your partners in the region who have a deep presence, and also try and strike the relationship, saying, hey, we are exploring this region. We would like to have you as one of the early partners. So let's talk, and we want to understand the market, and then ask them those concerns or questions you have, right? And also through your network, actually go to LinkedIn, just doing a bit of intelligence in figuring out, okay, go to companies, see if you're trying to sell an e-commerce product. So search for marketing, see what are the different profiles, what are the designations you can find in a typical ICP, right? Are there digital profiles? Are there profiles which is very specific to, let's say? So I think spending a few minutes or few hours on LinkedIn and those similar platforms, I think can reveal very specific on-ground information, right? Whether there are similar profiles, are there different profiles, or you can just go and read what let's say individual is actually responsible for. For us, as I said, based on the market maturity, some of the marketing folks were taking care of e-commerce. And then the way we figured out is, again, speaking to customers, counterparts. We spoke to a bunch of partners. We did a bunch of research around LinkedIn to figure out. I also spoke to, so I as an individual, right? We also went and spoke to people, connected with them on LinkedIn, requested them, hey, we want to understand the market. Can you spare some time? I think primary research is possibly the best way to get the right information, right? So no matter how much, of course, you can speak to analysts. Again, analysts, especially in the
Mhm.
emerging markets of Southeast Asia or India market, it's very hard to find analysts who actually know the market well.
Got
A
it.
lot of the times, in fact,
Mhm.
analysts used to talk to us, say, hey, we want to understand more about this market because we just don't have, an army of analysts, tracking the market, right?
Right.
So analysts are it's very challenging to actually get to know, the almost like the feet on the street kind of information or on-ground information. So the best is to do primary research, actually. LinkedIn, partners, some of your customer references.
Cus- Makes sense. Very interesting, right? And great approach, I think. The customers and the partner approach is really great because those people are right at your doorstep, right? Like you already have a good connect with them. Like you just have to like extend your ask and just on an exploring basis you need to connect with like different areas or different geos that they are present in as well. That's a really good point. So and then just delivering marketing, right? Like in these, now we have identified the persona, we have identified, let's say, the market and how it works, getting to know about that particular market. And then when it actually comes to delivering, like your marketing activities or doing different campaigns in that market, so how important is like localization and personalization in each of these markets, right? Because let's say in this case, if you take EMEA, this it's very hard to generalize your marketing for the entire Europe, right? Because each country would speak different languages, and it becomes essentially it becomes very difficult to like localize your marketing to Germany, localize it to Spain, localize it to Italy, localize it to Portugal, if you're selling in those countries. So how important in it is like how important is localization and personalization in different in one market, but then there are small different parts of the market as well which would consume your content differently.
I would take a step back, right? I'll possibly take a step back and figure out. So it's very important to understand before you even enter the market. So you typically have options. Imagine the classical SaaS playbook is built from India, mostly go and sell in the US, right? Everybody wants to do that, right? And then it's acceptable because the dollar value, the ACVs are much higher. So I think it's very important to, even before you talk about marketing, it's very important to be clear about where is the opportunity, right? Where does the opportunity truly lies? I think for which we have to be very mindful of, how do you put a method to this whole madness? We go and sell in the US, or should we go and sell in the Middle East, or should we go and sell in the, let's say, the Australian market, or let's say Southeast Asian market, right? I think it's not just about marketing; it's the entire value chain, right? All the way from product market fit. Do you have the sales capacity? Do you have the marketing capacity? Do you have the customer success? Right? And end of the day, we have to stack up all the things one beside the other and look at the big picture. Actually, even before you enter the market, I think it's very important to just be mindful. Saying, let's say have opportunity of, let's say, three regions. One framework that what I have used is you know looking at the looking at 5 6 parameters, right, in order to prioritize which market you want to go after. Actually, practically, right? So number one is, so one is a latent demand. Under demand, I would say latent demand is a sub bullet point, I would say. So latent demand is all about, let's say you are right now catering to customers in India, and some of your customers are global brands, and they pull you into specific geographies, right? So that happened in Capillary. So someone like in India, wherever one of our first customers, they said, hey, you folks are doing a great job, so do you mind working with us in Singapore as well, right? So we didn't even expect that this would happen. So one is the latent demand. So figure out signals where, for example, your existing customers pulling you into specific direction, saying, "Hey, can you also work with us in this specific country?" So
Right.
that's one. Second is, another way to do a pulse check on the latent demand is the inbound, right? The inbound queries you're getting. If you just look at your analytics, the kind of the relevant traffic you're getting, while you might be catering to India, what if a lot of the folks are coming on your blog from the US, or let's
Hmm.
say in the Southeast Asia, and they're reading about
Hmm.
it? So that's also another signal for a latent demand, right? And the third is the real demand. Actually, the real demand is, one way to look at is, you talk to partners in some of that, but quantitatively you can essentially figure out, looking at the search volume, especially there are commoditized markets like CRM, where we play, we can clearly see, let's say if you want to enter, you have a choice between Southeast Asia and Middle East. So we can just stack out what is the search volume across this geographies actually for, let's say, bottom of the funnel keywords. And for us, again, to give an example, back in capillary, the search volumes in the Middle East was almost 1/4 compared to the search volume in the Southeast Asia. So what it meant was the demand signal, was showing that in the Southeast Asia has, better demand actually. But I'll just come back to this. I'll tie this back to the whole personalization, localization angle which you just mentioned. So number one is demand actually, and then number two is definitely how mature the market is. I just spoke about how US and India was different. So that is also very, very important. So let's say you are a product which is for an early adopter or for a market which is very mature, then you have to be mindful about picking your market as well, right? You can't, if you go to a market which is not very mature, it takes a lot of time to educating them, and it might take sometimes years to get the market right.
Right.
And third is the competition, right? Again, I don't want to talk a lot about it, but you have to figure out not just the global players, having their tentacles, but also the local players. Sometimes, say in the Middle East, as I said, there are partners who are in turn selling the products. So competition is definitely important. That's the third thing or the fourth thing you should look at. And then fourth is the company readiness, right? So are you ready as a company to cater to that market? Do you have that work? Do you have the budget? Do you have the investment or the funding to really make that happen? I think number one is to really figure out, having this very simple framework about how do you pick the right market even before you launch actually, right? So that we are absolutely clear across the board, you are ready from the product, from the team, from the competition, the market readiness and some of that actually. So once okay, let's say, the latent demand is very high in Southeast Asia or in the Middle East, it's all about doing the test, like spending. I think one thing to do is just have a launch team, one sales and one marketing person, right? So you can just go and spend a month in the market actually, right? So talk to a bunch of partners, talk to a bunch of prospective customers. Maybe we can also dedicate some budget where we can, let's say, run SEM campaigns and LinkedIn or email campaigns. So set up those meetings so that in that 1 month potential period, right? Or let's say we can even stretch it to a quarter. Go and do real analysis, right? Real validation about what's the market looking like, whether the product is ready or do we need to do any specific local integrations and so on and so forth actually. So once you're clear, right? Once you're clear, that is the market to go after. Then it's all about execution actually. The execution becomes a lot simpler when you've done a lot of the groundwork across the board. Right? It's not just from a marketing point of view, from product integrations and things like that. So for example, for us, we wanted to launch in Thailand actually. So Thailand, we said it's one of the lucrative markets. We were already in some countries in Southeast Asia. We said it's a natural extension. However, we didn't get the market right for a good 6 to 9 months. So then we figured out, while we had a social CRM product, it was not taking off because social in Thailand was Viber. So Viber is another social network. It was the number 2. I think it was possibly number 1 for some time. It was much, it was much famous than Facebook actually back then. So the moment we figured out the integration with Viber was important, so then the conversations became a lot easier. Marketing became a lot easier because we were ready as a product, right? So I think it all starts with the product and rest of the other things I spoke. Yeah, then it's all about execution. I think the utopian case is for any marketer is to build this locally relevant and globally scalable framework. And I will possibly quote a couple of examples which we learned, right? I'll just tie back to the search volumes in the Middle East and in the Southeast Asia, right? So we found out this one by hard way saying, digital is not going to work in Middle East actually, especially in countries like Saudi where they're sort of largely under the firewall in a sense that they are not very mature. They don't know a lot about e-commerce. While people are buying stuff on marketplaces, but so that's when we realized digital as a GTM will possibly not work in Middle East. So that's when we spent time to forge a whole bunch of partnerships. We also had a local joint venture signed. It was not from the marketing point of view, but we sort of drove that happen. Right? We sort of made that happen, saying, for GTM to work, digital will not work actually. So after a very long period, I would say 3 to 4 years, we were able to crack the Middle East region because we went through the whole GTM was centered and anchored around partnerships actually. And
Well,
interestingly,
very
another example, right? Another quick example in Indonesia. So we were running campaigns in English, while Bahasa is a local language in Indonesia. And campaigns were working actually. So we said, fine, why do we have to worry much about a new language? We did a A/B testing and then we didn't see much difference. Then we did an event. When we did an event, we of course went the route saying, let's do it in English because we had this blind spot. Okay, campaigns are working in English, so let's also do the event in English actually. Unfortunately, the event was not a smashing success, even though we had a full house, even though we had the right personas in the room, half the battle was won. But another half in terms of getting the content right, the panel and the speakers were just not opening up actually. So we could
Mhm.
sense that. We could just sense that they were not at their best, right?
Mhm.
So while conversing. And then what we did the next event, we ensured the panel moderator and also the introductions and everything was done in Bahasa. And it was, I would say 80% Bahasa and 20% English, right? And we can just see the difference, pivotal difference in terms of how people were opening up. They were at their best, right? They were at their best in terms of sharing their learnings, and they're passionate about what they're talking. So I think one simple learning, right? So people might be okay to, while writing and reading, they were okay in English, but while conversing, they were not comfortable in English actually. So this is another example, right? Where these are the learnings we can only get when you go and talk to people actually, right? So
Right.
I was there, I was talking to a few CXOs, they were just not responding to me, right? So even though there were, some folks were CMOs. So my expectation was, they will be very good in English. The first event, as I said, they were not talking. Even I also, experienced it firsthand. They were just not ready to speak in English, right? So they were
Right.
just responding to answers, but they're not striking conversations
Conversing.
actually.
Yeah, makes sense. Really interesting points there, Ashwin. And I really picked like the phrase that you mentioned, building like locally relevant and globally scalable strategies, right? I think I'm gonna pick that one as a topic because I really like that phrase. So yeah, I think I would love to go on and on and talking about this particular topic, but we have reached the course of this episode. And let's quickly shift on to the lightning round. So I'm going to ask you like three questions, and you have to answer with whatever is on top of your mind. So yeah, the first one, like, what's the one fundamental change that you're making in your job in 2021?
I would say number one is focus, right? So focus is absolutely important because
Mm-hmm.
you have everything around you which will distract you, especially if you're connected from home. Your family, you have an opportunity to binge watch, you have an opportunity to eat a lot. So everything, the whole world is conspiring you to to distract, right? So I think number one learning agenda for me is to stay focused,
Mm-hmm.
not in terms of just a job, but also ensuring you stay focused on, let's say, picking one campaign and go deep. So things like that, right? That. So this is also a time where testing times, for the industry, right? And for the
Right.
companies. I think it's very important to maximize on every campaign or every initiative you do, rather than spread yourself too thin. Actually,
Interesting. So yeah, second one. What's the one thing that has helped you shorten your learning curve?
very very simple. I would say talk to people, talk to the right people. Actually,
Yeah, I think it's the same
uh,
for me as well.
you're doing it right now, and you're
Yeah.
smart. You're learning, and then you're also building your plan.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And it
Yeah,
works and it's validated. So yeah.
I do. I also do read a lot. I also watch stuff, but
Mhm.
I also ensure I read diverse set of things. Right, it's not just SaaS actually. Right, so I also read B2C marketing. I read stuff around direct to consumer. Uh, Literally everything possible. I read about cryptocurrency. I know some of them I don't understand, but down the line, I read about arts, I read about social innovation. Down the line, you'll be able to connect a lot of the dots, actually,
Right.
right? So learnings from let's say Amul, right? Amul as a company, and then I read this beautiful book called I Too Had a Dream. How this guy who was very sophisticated, how did he actually build a cooperative or a social enterprise, which is arguably now one of the largest, right? Largest in Asia, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I read stuff which is diverse, and I talk to people.
Nice. That's amazing. And then my last one, right? Like, what do you know about your work now that you wish you would have known when you first started?
Okay. I think a bunch actually, a bunch of it. I think one is so the functional skill set will take time, right? So functional knowledge about the industry, etc. That is something you will only get over a period of time. But one thing, let's say before, let's say, I just started my job. Some of the basics, right? So one is, how do you communicate, what you're doing, right? So how do you communicate, how do you ask for help? So communication, under communication bucket, isn't there multiple things? One is
Mm-hmm.
how do you communicate what you're doing? How do you ask for help? Because again, that's one quick way to knock roadblocks out of your way. And otherwise, the whole week you'll be working on something, and then the answer for some of the challenges would be just help from someone, right? So
Mm-hmm.
asking for help, communicating in a very clear way. I think these are the couple of things which I wish I would have learned from day one, right? That would have possibly accelerated my career to multiple X. Because functional knowledge will take time. I don't wish I had all the functional knowledge I have now on day one. That's not possible. But I'm talking more about softer aspects, right? How do
Right.
you ask the right questions? How do you communicate to people?
Very, very interesting. I think that's a good learning to have. So yeah, thanks a lot, Ashwin, for taking time today and coming and sharing all these amazing insights with us and great examples of your own from your own personal experience on how did you go to that particular market, expand and select the right persona and how do you personalize and localize your activities towards them, right? So really interesting and I really loved all the insights that you shared. So yeah, thanks a lot for taking time today.
Absolutely, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. Again, I
Hmm.
wish all your subscribers, listeners the best. And then, yeah, I think we're just getting started. I think we still have, 100 times more opportunity in terms
Totally.
of the market, right? Software is still not done. There's still so much on on-premise, and then, yeah, SaaS is going to eat all that away, actually.
Totally. Software is eating the world.
Yeah, yeah, that was
Cool.
SaaS is eating software.
Yeah. Awesome.